Hello, and welcome to our talk on getting started with lifestyle change. I'm Dr. Jan Raytav. I'm the clinical psychologist at the Toronto Rehab Cardiac Rehab Unit. And what I'm going to be talking to you about today is the things that you can do for yourself, the things that are helpful for you to be successful in taking action and changing aspects of your lifestyle. Perhaps your goal is to reduce stress. Perhaps it's to reduce the intake of fats or change other elements of your diet. There's a lot of things that we understand that we should be doing in different ways in order to benefit our heart health. So some of the topics I'm going to talk about are ways that you can be successful in this. We'll talk specifically about reducing stress, but broadly as well about improving lifestyle. And finally, at the end, I'll mention some of the resources we have available to you at Toronto Rehab so that you can be successful in your quest. So this next slide captures what I think should be your spirit and the attitude with which you approach making lifestyle change. This is a picture of a man who is in a yoga pose that's called the warrior. And the warrior is grounded. The warrior is looking to the future. The warrior is ready for action. Now, what kind of action do you need to take? Well, let me begin by promoting all of you, giving you a promotion to president. How does that sound? President of your own company. What is that company? Your own rehabilitation corporation. A very important entity. The way that you respond to this challenge is the key to how you will succeed in reducing your heart risk. For many of you, this is not the promotion you were looking for. You would have far rather got the call from the 649 lottery people telling you that you won the big prize. However, life brings us in its own direction, and we have to cope with the challenges that we face. So in your new job as president, you're going to need some support. You're going to need some information. You will have to make some tough decisions. If you're like most presidents, you're going to call a meeting of your board to find out what's going on. And the news will mainly be bad news. Now, it may not be exactly this news, but some of these points may apply to you. For example, your fat processing division may be in telling you that you've been mismanaging your inventory for years, and you now have the good old Canadian Tire, the abdominal fat storage. Or your physical activity division may be telling you that, you know what, you've been cutting it back for years and years due to your overcommitment to working for a living. Many of us do this gradually, and it creeps up on us. And finally, the relaxation and enjoyment division may not even come to the meeting because they don't exist any longer. So there are needs to make certain changes. And as a psychologist, what I would tell you is that any lifestyle change is a behavioral change, but it's a change in many, many patterns that you do or that you've come to do unconsciously, and we all tend to be creatures of habit. We all love to live in the comfort zone, that zone where we don't have to think a lot. We can do the same things over and over again, and most of the time those things work for us. However, if you've had a heart attack, you will have been jolted out of your comfort zone. Your heart will have told you, no more. I can't take this any longer. You must change your ways. So what I'm going to cover in the next half an hour or so are important strategies that you can adopt in rising to the challenge that your heart has given you. Stay motivated, keep focused. Only you can change you. So there was a little bit of tongue-in-cheek when I said you're promoted to president. But the essence of what I said is true. You have to make the changes. As President Truman of the U.S. said, the buck stops here. If you care about your heart and you care about your health, you must make the difference. So the starting point is going to be your attitude. And for that, I encourage you to develop what is called a hardy personality. What is a hardy personality? Well, this was studied in the 70s by a psychologist in Chicago, Elizabeth Kabasa, who found that there were 3 elements that she found among executives that predicted how well they managed stress. She had 2 groups, executives who did very well with responding to the challenge of stress, and other executives who did rather a poor job and were struggling with the challenges they faced. And the reason she did these studies was that she had the idea that if all of us can learn to do things more like the successful executives, the ones who are managing stress well, then we will all benefit. And this is what she determined. She said that the good executives were doing 3 things consistently and repeatedly. The first thing has to do with their attitude. Their attitude was that they would see the challenge in change. And they would view change not as an unwelcome intruder, but rather as an incentive for your own personal growth. In Chinese, the character for crisis is a combination of 2 symbols, meaning danger, or a problem, and opportunity. And that is what this attitude captures. It's being able to see the opportunity even in moments of crisis. The second element that she found was what she called commitment. Commitment is the approach where whatever these executives decided to do, whether it was something for themselves, like playing a sport, something for their work, like successfully bringing a new project online, or something for their family, like organizing a family reunion. Whatever they did, they threw their all into it. They would put their energy into it. And congratulations to each of you who have decided to do the home program at Toronto Rehab, for taking the time out of your busy schedules to make sure that you don't ignore your heart and your future health. Keep committing to that project and doing your exercising every week. The third element that these executives exhibited was a control factor. And she defined control here as the person having a sense of personal control over most of the important aspects of their life. Now, today we often call this empowerment, the sense that what I do matters. It matters a lot. In psychological research, this has also been called internal locus of control. And an internal locus of control person is someone who understands that they make a difference. So, even though you cannot control everything, that is, all external events that happen to you, nonetheless, you retain a deep sense that you have a choice about what you do and how you react, whether it's to a stressor or whether it's to making a life change. And the interesting finding that Dr. Kabasa published was that the executives who did have all 3 elements of the hardy personality decrease their risk of developing stress-related health problems by 50%. 50% is huge. Just think of it. 50% less visits to your doctor, 50% less procedures, 50% less medications, less heart attacks. That is a tremendous finding, and all because of their psychological approach to the challenges of their stress and life. So all of you are now facing the question of, what should I change? At Toronto Rehab, we have a program of using SMART goals, setting SMART goals for yourself. So you need to decide what will give you the biggest bang for your buck. I would start with something that you would feel fairly confident in being able to make a change in. So it may not be the biggest factor that challenges you as far as your heart goes, but it's an important one. And in this slide you see the list of risk factors that the InterHeart study told us were of importance to all heart patients. At the top of the list are smoking and high cholesterol. If those are under control and they do not represent ongoing risks for you, then you're looking towards one of the other areas indicated below. Could be stress, could be your body weight, could be your blood pressure, could be blood sugar levels, could be inactivity. Although if you're doing your program in the home program, you are likely tackling that one. Or it could be diet, the kinds of foods that you're eating and how much of them you're having. So wherever you want to begin, you're going to want to approach this situation with the traits of the Hardy personality that we spoke about earlier. What I'm going to spend most of the time in the remainder of this talk is focusing on stress as a particular thing to change and how you might be successful in changing your stress levels. Now, in the earlier talk about chronic stress as a factor in heart health, we highlighted that it's not the appearance of stress that is a problem. We're wired that way. You can't change that. What you do want to be really good at is getting yourself back to normal. That is recovering quickly and efficiently. So I'm going to talk about ways that you can do that. And this fact that we can effectively change how we respond to elements that are stressing us out there in our lives has been around for a long time. And I start with this quote from William James, a psychologist who said this 100 years ago, so well before any of us were even born. What did he say? He said, "The greatest discovery of my generation is that human beings can alter their lives by altering their attitudes of mind." Very, very important. So how can you go about altering your attitude of mind? Well, the first element is recognition. You have to be aware when you are stressed. This signal might come from physical sensations like getting a headache or muscle tension. It could come from psychological experience, irritability, nervousness, sadness. Could come from your behavior, being aware of when you reach for a cigarette or when you might have a drink. So understanding that there is a higher level of stress within you is the first step. Next, you want to figure out what triggered it. What caused me to react? And of course, triggers are different for each one of us. However, if you begin to be aware of what aspects of your day-to-day life become the triggers that get to you more quickly, then you are left with some choices and options. Certainly, wherever possible, you want to make an effort to change the stressor, the thing that is bothering you. So if it's a boss who is dumping a job on your desk at the last minute regularly, you might try to discuss with them a regular meeting to plan the work for the week ahead proactively so that you have an idea of what's coming up. In many cases, you can't change the external events. In that case, you have only two other choices. One is to remove yourself from the highly stressful situation. In some cases, you can do that. It can be an effective strategy for buying some time and for calming yourself down so that when you reintroduce yourself back into the stressful situation, you may be able to tackle it more effectively. But in every case, you can certainly change your reaction to what is happening. And here I'm going to lay out for you 6 points. I call this the TRI Stress Reduction Plan. And this should really go hand in hand with what you're already doing in your exercising and build on it rather than be something totally different from what you're already doing. In terms of the 6 steps, the foundation, the basis for the whole thing is understanding that making your health your number one priority and continuing to act and make choices on that basis is the most important element of a good stress reduction plan. The second point is to be mindful of the particular persistent stresses, the things that come up over and over again and that affect you, perhaps in small ways, but still they keep bugging you. Be mindful of those. That's the lesson from Interheart. Pay attention to those kinds of stresses. The third element is developing an effective body relaxation approach, being able to calm yourself, both physically in your body and also mentally in your mind. Fourth, I would urge you all to consider seeking out friends, perhaps friends that you've not talked to for a long time. You've been so busy, you've allowed friendships to slowly wither or be neglected. Those can be helpful in terms of generating new ideas, renewing you, and giving you some fresh directions to go in. When you start making lifestyle changes, always start small. Begin with small things. Gradually, they add up. There is a tipping point where they begin to take hold and make a big, big difference for you. And finally, and certainly not least, is cultivating your funny bone. Being able to laugh. Laughter itself can be tremendously medicinal. As they say, laughter is the best medicine. So let me go through each of these steps and elaborate a little bit in terms of what you need to know and understand. So the first point I made about starting with your health. You're all doing an exercise program. You're all going out walking 5 times a week. That walking itself is part of reducing stress. How do we know, and how does that work? Well, in the other talk, I elaborated how stress works in the body. And that system is called the sympathetic nervous system that activates that stress. Now, when you walk, your body starts producing what are called neuropeptides. There are a whole range of them. In the last 10 years, we've found, 5 to 10 to 20 of these things. And these neuropeptides go back to the stress system and begin to turn it off. And when you think about it, it's brilliant. If you were to design a stress system that was capable of responding instantly and would allow you to act quickly, running to safety or battling to defend yourself, how brilliant that what would turn that system off is the physical act of running to safety or of fighting in self-defense. So it's the activity that turns the stress off. and the mechanism is the neuropeptides. And what modern research tells us is that many of these neuropeptides begin to increase with exercise, and in fact, they begin to be evident even shortly after your exercise has begun. So you don't have to run a marathon to have this benefit. So the take-home message: undertake some moderate exercise, especially in periods of time when you feel more stressed. It can be very, very helpful for your well-being. The second point: be mindful of your persistent stressors. Now, in the previous talk, I had you all complete the Stop Distress questionnaire. And in it, you evaluated how persistent some of those elements were in your day-to-day life. If you scored a 6 or higher in those questions, I would urge you to also complete the Memo to the President questionnaire. So this questionnaire is designed to help you focus in on some of the things that you might consider doing differently and how you can approach changing those patterns. If you do know what areas are impacting you, that is most helpful in making plans to reduce stress. In terms of relaxation, in the States, there is a health guru, fairly widely read and recognized. His name is Dr. Andrew Weil. He's written many books on optimizing health, and he makes the assertion that every adult, not only those who've had a heart problem, every single adult should be doing something to relax, to train their body to relax as they proceed through our fairly hectic lifestyle. So, my message to each of you as a heart patient in our program is that learning to relax again in a particularly profound way is a very important aspect of your ultimate success. To be able to disconnect from your day-to-day pressures is vital, not from the point of view of escaping them or leaving them, but from the point of view of going offline for a period of time, perhaps 10 minutes, maybe 20, to basically recharge your batteries, to revitalize yourself and your efforts. How does that work? Well, luckily, the body has another system, or a parallel system to the sympathetic system, which drove our stress response, and that's called the parasympathetic system. And in this slide, what you see is the two nerve systems supply innervation to virtually all the organs in the body, with the red system being the excitatory, and the purple or blue system being the parasympathetic that relaxes you. So, how can you activate and how can you train the system? And I really underline, it is training it to do well. In day-to-day life, we typically don't take time to train ourselves to relax effectively. And as a result, the stress system becomes the dominant system. It's always trumping every other reaction. And as a result, chronic stress becomes more prominent. So, let's look at how you can train the parasympathetic system. Basically, the approaches and the choices here are many. In fact, my guess is that many of you have already done some of these things at different points in your life, but have not persisted. What are they? Well, an important element, and a very easy to do element, is breathing. Not just breathing in a normal, everyday way, but teaching yourself to breathe through the diaphragm, okay? Abdominal or belly breathing. And there is another segment, another talk on the web link that will show you how to go about doing that. Very effective, very easy to do. A second element is using progressive muscle relaxation. This will take you about 20 to 25 minutes of time, but is most effective in really training your body to relax and let go of the stress and the tension of everyday life. There are other approaches, using visualization, especially visualizing scenes that make you feel happy inside, make you smile, warm scenes. You can use meditation. Today you have options of going to yoga classes, taking Tai Chi, or doing meditation at home. There is a wonderful book written by Jon Kabat-Zinn called Mindfulness, or what his approach is called is Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction. The book is called Full Catastrophe Living, and I cite that towards the end of this talk. In addition, stretching. Just doing some stretches of your muscles before and after you do your exercise prescription is tremendously helpful for your body and increasing and improving your state of relaxation. Finally, you can go for a massage, you can take a hot or warm bath. Any of those options are readily available to most people. And research tends to tell us that it doesn't really matter which of these choices you choose. All of them seem to work just fine. The key question and the key factor is, do you use the approach regularly? If you don't, it's not going to work. It doesn't help to know what you should do. You have to do it. The fourth step in the stress reduction process or plan that I put forward to you has to do with friendship and relationships. And the importance of this comes from the fact that in life, we as human beings are social creatures. We are not rocks that we're comfortable being placed here or there and can lie there or sit there for days or months or years without interaction. We need interaction. And Wayne Sotil, a psychologist who's worked with cardiac patients for many years, made the statement in '92 that there is a critical importance of a happy primary relationship to your recovery from a heart attack. In addition, Dean Ornish, one of the pioneers in the field of rehabilitation for heart patients, said in 1998 that his findings indicated that patients who'd had heart attacks and who were in long-term intimate partnerships had a much lower death rate 5 years after the event than those who did not. Now, what is the meaning of these two quotes? Does it mean that if you've lost your partner or if you're single, that you are out of luck? No, it does not. What it means is you have to look at your relationships and determine where in your life do you have that happy primary relationship. And what is a primary relationship? It is a relationship where you can talk to the other person about what's on your mind and how you feel. That can be positive feelings. If you've had a great day, who can you call? Who can you tell? Or if you've had a miserable day with some setbacks or bad news and you need to talk to somebody, who can you call? So those things are very important. Now, social support generally is also very critical for heart patients. We know that those who have social support functions in some respects as a factor that reduces the likelihood of another or subsequent coronary event. In addition, we know if you have a support network, they are going to support you if you talk to them about the lifestyle changes that you're planning to make, if you tell them what you're already doing with your exercising and your exercise prescription, and that you've signed up as a patient here at Toronto Rehab, they're more than likely going to want to support you. They'll ask you, how is it going? How are you doing? Sometimes they'll say, can I join you? I'd like to do that myself. So we know that relationships and support have a positive impact on your success. Earlier I talked about emotional reactions. This is in the other talk on stress. And especially the fact that you can get some chronic reactive emotions, anxiety, depression, and so on. But even if it's just the normal emotional ups and downs, the roller coaster that we all go through, I'm highlighting here, it's not only you that experiences these feelings. In addition, the members of your family, those around you who love you, are also affected. Now, they may not experience exactly the same feelings that you're currently feeling. They may have different reactions, but they will have reactions nonetheless. Could be anxiety, could be a sense of powerlessness. Whatever it is, be open and mindful of the fact that there are some reactions. And take some time to recognize and to talk about those feelings. Ask the other person how they are doing and how your heart attack has affected them. If those aren't recognized, there is a chance that those cause great tension and stress, and ongoing stress within the family situation. And of course, in every family, there are pre-existing family conflicts, people in the family who don't talk to other people and don't get along and so forth. And oftentimes, having a heart attack may strain some of those other relationships. So if you're aware of that, it might help you to navigate through that. In terms of relationships, there are things that you need to do, especially if you're finding yourself isolated in one way or another. And this can happen inadvertently. Certainly in our program, I meet patients who had a very loving family around them as recently as 5 or 10 years ago, and yet their spouse died or they were divorced. Their children grew up. They may have left to live in California or England or somewhere else, and so they now find themselves quite alone. So if that is the case, I would recommend heartily that do something about this. You have to reach out. You're the person who has to establish a new support network. There are many ways that you can approach this. For example, if there are friends, old university colleagues that you've not talked to for many years or have kind of drifted apart, consider calling them, talking to them, updating them on what's going on for you. The same with work or family, relatives. Go and visit someone who you haven't seen, a cousin or someone, for quite a while. You can join a group. In a city like Toronto, there are so many activities that it boggles the mind. There are groups run out of community centers, out of libraries, out of churches, synagogues, and mosques. Many, many opportunities that people are not aware of or find that they're too busy to respond to. So consider joining some kind of activity when your time allows. Right now, your most important priority is your heart health and making the changes that you're incorporating into your new routines. While we're talking about relationships, I think it's also important to talk about sex and your sex life. In terms of your heart and your overall risk, cardiologists will tell you that typically within 4 to 6 weeks of a heart attack, you are physically able to return back to your sexual activity. Another way of determining this is when you can climb up 2 flights of stairs comfortably without being out of breath, you're probably ready to return to your sex life. Now, the fact that you can return does not mean that you won't have some fear or trepidation. Many people will have a sense of foreboding or worry, whether they're going to have another heart attack or perhaps could die. Some people worry about what the sex itself will be like, whether it will be as rewarding or as pleasurable as it was before. Now, there's many reasons that your experience of your sexual activities can be very, very different after an event like a heart attack. For example, we know there are patients who, after their heart attack, are now diagnosed with diabetes. And diabetes itself can cause erectile dysfunction. There are also psychological factors that may come into play where you begin to feel anxious or depressed. And we know many patients struggle with depression after a heart attack. And as we saw in the first lecture on stress, depression has as one of its features an inability to really feel pleasure from sexual activity. So if any of these things apply to you, please don't ignore it. Don't just hope that it goes away. Consider communicating. Talk to your partner to begin with, and if that does not lead to a resolution, then you can also include perhaps your family doctor or contact us at the Cardiac Rehab Center. Now, the 5th point in the plan towards reducing stress has to do with learning new tricks. And on this slide that you have in front of you is what's called the learning curve. So there is a gradual upsloping line that starts on the lower left corner, and as it rises to the right, it indicates that across time you develop greater competence. Now, the meaning of this graph is the following, that if you go across the bottom, say for 1/3 of the distance, you look at how much you've gained in terms of competence and being able to change patterns, and you see there is a very modest improvement. If you continue and you go along to the right for another 1/3 distance, an equal amount of time, persisting at making exactly the same changes, what you do find is there is a larger improvement, a better outcome. And if you continue still for the 1/3 of the bottom, then you find the improvement level starts to take off exponentially, and your results improve accordingly. The message in this is be patient at the beginning. Don't be discouraged by what you perceive as a lack of result or too little result for the effort you put in. I think the right attitude is captured by the fellow on the trapeze. And he is saying he's trying to perfect the trapeze act where he's catching his partner. He hasn't quite caught him yet, but he is now at least getting his tights. So he's moving forward. And his attitude is this: if you don't make mistakes, you aren't really trying. And I think there are some words of wisdom there in terms of how change happens. You have to take a risk. You have to be ready to fail in order to create a new pattern. And also superimposed on this learning curve at the bottom is what I call the emotional learning curve. And that is, when we start something, we often feel exuberant. So in this graph, you'll see it spikes up, and that might have been when you decided to join our Toronto Rehab home program. You felt good, you thought, this is great, I'm going to do something for myself, I am so pleased. Then something happens. You get busier at work, you're not able to do your exercise for 2 or 3 weeks in a row. You feel discouraged and despondent, you wonder, why did I even bother? But you pick up, you get out of that phase, you have some time, you get back on track, and you find you're getting some positive results. And so you get this kind of a roller coaster up and down, which is superimposed on what you're actually accomplishing underneath everything. So be aware that your emotions can sometimes derail you if you respond prematurely to discouragement. So the take-home message is, when you're making behavioral changes, just accept that change is difficult, and you've got to develop your own way of doing it. However, keep trying new things. Do not be discouraged. Do not give up. One of the sheets in your package includes some behavioral strategies that you can start using this week, now, to plan for success, to make it easier to do your regular exercising, and you can apply the same strategies to other lifestyle changes that you may want to make. In addition to lifestyle or behavioral change, as well, you want to be mindful of connectedness. I spoke earlier about friendship. But friendship and spirituality are interconnected. And I have a quote here from Wayne Sotil, who wrote a book in 2003, which I would highly recommend to every heart patient. Dr. Sotil has had over 20 years of experience working with heart patients. And in his book, Thriving with Heart Disease, he gives some very practical approaches to dealing with the common barriers and problems that come up as you're trying to deal with your heart condition. And he uses the word thriving very intentionally. He says, heart disease is a second chance illness. Every one of you who's had a heart attack came close to the end, but you dodged the bullet. You now have a second chance. Do something with this second chance. As psychologists will tell you, if you persist in the behavior that you've been doing prior to the heart attack, you can't really hope for a better outcome than another heart attack. So learn from the experience and change things. Now, in the quote here, Dr. Sotil says, every thriving patient, that's every patient who really gets it and makes changes and sees things differently and is trying in a different way. He says every thriving patient seems to mature. They seem to grow wiser after their diagnosis and event. Although everyone treads a different path to get there, each one seems to manifest a heightened spiritual sense or a mindfulness of the world around them and of their mysterious place in it. So feeling connected with each other, feeling connected with life, seeing our lives as being related to the lives of those around us, is itself an important achievement and an important activity. And recently, Daniel Siegel has published a book called The Mindful Brain. And he talks about the COAL mindset. COAL here is an acronym for 4 different functions that are very important in terms of how one approaches life. He proposes that we should all approach life with curiosity, that we should be interested in what is happening around us, and not to get caught up in our worries and fears, but be open to what is happening. Openness to experience, openness to your internal reactions is a quality that's part of this mindset. Acceptance. Acceptance means not only accepting what is happening around you, accepting some of the stresses, some of the very difficult and painful things that you face in your life situation, but also it means accepting your feelings, your reactions, and of understanding that you have a role to play in sorting through that. And finally, love. Love, he says, is something that comes spontaneously when you're doing things in an open, accepting, curious way. That you just naturally feel for another person. You feel for others, even those who are not that close to you in your day-to-day life. So all of us, I think, can benefit from having had a heart attack, a close call, and we can begin to nurture this kind of spiritual sense. So to bring us back to the key point, which is making changes, I would say to each of you, the time for action is now. There is no time to delay. You should all, by the end of this talk, begin to be getting an idea of what you can change or what you need to change, whether it has to do with weight, your activities, finding things that are enjoyable, relaxing, whatever it is. Consider how you're going to change your day-to-day patterns and include those healthy patterns now. In terms of resources, we have tried to provide you with some things that are effective, that are easy to use, and that guide you in making some of these important changes. In the handouts in your binder, you will find the behavioral strategies sheet that I mentioned earlier. There is the distress questionnaire that you completed and some information that accompanies it. There is the memo to the President, which I spoke of earlier in this talk. And there is the Toronto Rehab Stress Reduction Plan, the 6-point plan of things that you can consider changing in your day-to-day routines. Other resources include lectures by Dr. Brian Baker. He talks about the emotional roller coaster that we're on after a heart event. That's the lecture he calls From Event to Recovery. Well worth hearing. In addition, as you get closer to the end of your program, and as you're beginning to tackle the question of how you can keep up with the changes that you have introduced into your life, he has another talk called Mind Your Heart, which talks about strategies that you can use effectively. For those of you who are readers, many people learn the most from reading and love to get good books that tackle important information and give them help in things that they want to understand better and change. Here's a short list of what I would consider excellent starting points about some of the questions that we've addressed earlier today. For example, the emotional ups and downs are well described in Dr. Baker and Michael Dorian's book called Recovering from Heart Disease in Body and Mind. There's Dr. Sotil's book, Thriving with Heart Disease, which has sections in it on handling depression, anxiety, anger, sexual difficulties. There is John Kabat-Zinn's book on full catastrophe living. In it, he describes in the first 10 chapters ways that you can begin to introduce relaxation strategies into your day-to-day life. If eating and diet are issues that you are concerned about and want to make some changes in, there is the American Heart Association's book, The No Fad Diet book. Very clear, very helpful. And if you're wanting to think about the question of spiritual change and how you might foster and encourage that part of your own life to develop, an excellent starting point would be Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, a guide to spiritual enlightenment. All of those are readily available through your local bookstore. In addition, you should be aware we have a few resources and activities that we provide here through our center, and they are available to our home program patients. The first I would mention is the Cardiac Support Group. Now, this is an opportunity for people who've had a heart event of some kind to come in and sit down with their peers, others who have faced exactly the same jolt, and come to terms with what it means for them, how their lives are changed, and how they can respond and adjust to the challenge. Very effective. Most patients enjoy this tremendously. In addition, I run a workshop designed to teach people the skills in relaxing and calming themselves down. I call it the Chronic Stress Reversal Workshop. And of course, there's also things available in your community. You might talk to your family doctor, go to community centers, talk to neighbors, etc. And in terms of these groups and when they function, they are usually recurring in terms of their start dates. So every few months we start a new group. Typically, the Cardiac Support Group is running Wednesday mornings from 9 o'clock. And the Chronic Stress Workshop runs Thursday afternoons from 3 to 5 every second week. Again, both of those begin periodically, and you just have to call for information to get your name on the list. So that's it. That's the suggestion and encouragement I would offer you in terms of how to go about making some changes in your lifestyle so that you can live a healthier, happier life. If you have any questions on anything that's come up for you, feel free to contact myself at the email address indicated on this slide, and I will be delighted to respond to your questions. Thank you, and good luck.